All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Samson Tafera. I am the president of We Aspire. I'd like to welcome you to the second webinar of We Aspire for 2022. We Aspire's mission is to enhance the world knowledge about Africa and its people. It's run by volunteers who understand the value of intellectual approach to information sharing. We want poverty to be a thing of the past. We want to empower by presenting context. We want to step in where there is a void. We want to reach out when there is a need. We want to support when a project is burdened. We want to protect when witness are vulnerable. We exist because we care. We are Africans standing for Africa. I'm happy we have a very diverse panel participant here today. We have two of our We Aspire members, Dr. Turuso Asafa and PhD candidate Magdalawit Masai, who will be moderating this discussion. With that, a water expert who works at the Florida Water, Dr. Turuso Asafa, our senior expert in We Aspire, will open up and set the stage for the discussion. With that, Dr. Turuso.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have exciting presentation today, and we got very good expertise, and you will enjoy just like the other time. The idea today is each panelist will have a framing session about 5 to 7 minutes. They will give us a big picture related to the topic in hand, and then we will follow up by question and answer. So we will be given extended time for question and answer because the last time people said, hey, we needed more. We had 1 hour and we plan to give probably 1 hour and a half this time. So more is driven by question and answer. After they finished, I will introduce each of them and they will put their framing presentation. After they finish, myself and Magdalawit, we have prepared question, and then also we bring live the audience question as well. So continue to send your question, and we will start with our first presenter. That will be Professor Assad. Professor Assad has considerable research and consultancy and technology transfer experience in the field of hydrology and water resources. Dr. Shamsuddin acted as a reviewer for engineering design guideline, both internationally and international, which are important. Some of them looks at climate change. His research focuses on innovative predictive modeling, combining an experimental approach to advance scientific knowledge. His work covers a wide area, including climate change, land use, urban water management, catchment hydrology, global water cycle, natural hazards, and importantly, risk and reliability analysis as well. He is currently the vice chair for the Sustainable Development Goal Working Group of the International Association of Hydro-Environmental and Engineering Research Group, IHR, as we call it in short. So the floor is yours, Dr. Assad.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asafa, and thank you very much for as We Aspire, for hosting this important event. So I am going to focus my talk on some of the challenges that the GERD dam poses in Sudan. And those challenges are basically in terms of dam safety and also in terms of environmental and also socioeconomic impacts. The issue of dam safety is causing a lot of anxiety and stress for many Sudanese, and that is basically stems from the large capacity of the GERD dam itself. Also, in addition to that one, there have been studies which suggested that the GERD dam is built on a fault line. There is also recent studies which has suggested that there is also vertical displacement, and also the tension between the 3 countries, and also in terms of also exchanging some of the information related to dam safety. Say, for example, last year, both the Minister of Water in Sudan and Egypt, they have mentioned that is Ethiopia did not release some of the documents related to dam safety. Furthermore, there are some important studies which need to be completed. For example, dam break analysis, and those studies are very, very important in terms of evaluation of risk, especially on the downstream countries, Sudan and Egypt. And those studies, with regard to the dam break analysis, has been actually suggested or have been recommended by the International Panel of Experts. There have been an international panel of experts looking at various aspects related to the GERD dam, and they have actually suggested that a dam break analysis should be completed, because that will enable you to answer scenarios. What will happen if a dam fail, if the dam fail, or if a dam break? So what areas which will be inundated? And also it will help in terms of preparing emergency plan and so on. Again, this study has not been completed by the 3 countries, but however, there are some published studies which suggested that if the GERD dam collapse, the effect on Sudan will be catastrophic. Many cities will be inundated. A lot of agricultural land also will be destroyed, and a lot of lives also will be lost. Of course, the GERD dam also provides some opportunities in terms of increasing the hydropower production in some of the Sudanese dams. But however, those increases, they are very small. Say, for example, if you take the Research Dam, which is on the border of Ethiopia, that has a capacity of 200 megawatt, and it is predicted that is after the GERD dam, it will increase by 20%. So it has a small capacity, and 20% of increase of a small capacity, that's not very big. Also in the Marawi Dam, which is located in the north of Sudan, and that has a capacity of 1,250 megawatt. Also, it's predicted that it will increase by 80%. So it will provide also some limited opportunity for increasing the hydropower production. One of the other issues, the environmental issues, which related to the GERD dam, is the reduction of sediments, and also it is predicted that is after the completion of the GERD dam, that is 86% of the sediments will be lost, and that is also good news for the operation and for the operation of dams and irrigation canal. But on the other hand, the reduction of the sediment load, in addition to the changes in the flow regime, will increase the erosion from the riverbed and also from the bank, and that will lead to what do you call it? Will lead to the collapse of the floodplains of the Blue Nile, and also of the river of the main line, also the Blue Nile, and that will reduce the amount of the fertile lands that people use traditionally for agriculture. In addition to that, it will pose risk to some water infrastructure built on the Nile or the Blue Nile. Again, because when you reduce the sediment supply, also because the sediments act as what they call it, as a natural fertilizer, big irrigation schemes such as the Jazeera scheme, we would expect that is the amount of chemical fertilizer to be used after the GERD dam, will be increased, and actually that will also have cost. Again, the changes in the water qualities, it might lead to salinization of it will lead to salinization of the soil, and that is, in order to address that one, you need actually more water, and also you need to develop what do you call it, a drainage system. In addition to that, there is impact on fish and forestry and so on. Also, it is predicted that is Sudan has a lot of floodplain agriculture that is very traditional, is very sustainable. It doesn't use any a chemical, and that floodplain agriculture take place on the side of the Nile, and it's predicted that after GERD, Sudan will lose half of the area that is traditionally used for floodplain agriculture. Then it also has impacts on some of the traditional industries such as bricklaying. Also, there is another dimension which is much more political, is that the GERD Dam is built in an area of indigenous people. Say, for example, in the Blue Nile area in Sudan, which is bordering Ethiopia, a lot of indigenous people were actually protesting against big dams. They were protesting against the heightening of the Osiris Dam, and also now they are protesting against the GERD Dam. Also, we have also the indigenous people of Beni Shangol, also they are protesting against the dam, and also there is, I think there was a protest in Khartoum to the United Nations about the GERD Dam. Then the question is how do we take the indigenous people view in the development of the GERD Dam? Because at the end of the day, if these issues are not dealt with, it will actually it may affect the regional stability. I think I have taken a lot of time, or do I have more time?
I think for now that's enough frame setting. I really appreciate that. You put a lot of points, so we'll come back to some of them. Thank you for
talk
that.
More, but it's okay.
We'll come back. Yeah, with question and answer, I think people probably will get even more than what you give them. So we will go to our next panelist, Dr. Jonas Gebretzadek. Dr. Jonas is a regional water analyst at Nile Basin Initiative. He has participated in large-scale projects since 2003. He focused mainly within the Nile Basin in areas of flood protection, early warning, transboundary joint multipurpose projects, irrigation, drainage, water management, and then also basin-wide hydrologic studies, which are very important, I think, and development of planning and decision support tools for the basin. He specializes in analysis of involving hydrologic and water resource systems modeling, including GIS, remote sensing, and all those. Dr. Johannes got his PhD and master's from Addis Ababa University and his PhD from Colorado, University of Colorado at Boulder. And I'm really happy to have you because you have a big picture knowledge as well. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Trusso, for that generous introduction. Thank you for having me as well. I want to focus on the big picture, and I want to focus on the topic of the value of cooperation. Under that, I have two subtopics that I'll be talking about. So if I end up taking too much time, please feel free to interrupt me. The first topic is I want to talk a little bit about what the major challenge has been for the Nile Basin countries in terms of achieving major cooperation among themselves as they have been working together for the past 20 plus years. And the second one is that I've worked with the Nile Basin Initiative for some time, and I want to give some examples of what the NBA is doing to promote cooperation, and why that particular path is not only important, but really the only way out of this issue that the countries are having at the moment. To talk about the major hurdle, inherently the Nile Basin is rather complex water resources systems, and not the hydrology per se, but the issue of water utilization and water right. The existing dynamic of water supply and consumption is a bit more involved. The Nile Basin is shared by 10 countries or 11 countries if you consider Eritrea, that are facing many complex environmental, social, economic, and political challenge in a quite how do I say it, quite heterogeneous way. They have different level of economic status and water utilization, and therefore different developmental objective, as well as different level of political influence. So generally, the countries understand the benefit of cooperation and realize it as being the least cost alternative to sharing the resource. However, the level of cooperation is not yet mature enough to solve and then the Grand Ethiopian Resource Dam, which majority of the cases is in fact clearly beneficial to all the three countries, and could have been a classic example of win-win project. There are a number of challenges, of course, holding the countries back from realizing this meaningful, so to say, level of cooperation. But the way I understand it, this is just from my observation, at the end of the day, it all boils down to trust and confidence the countries have among themselves, which is an essential ingredient of any collaboration, really. The level of trust required is simply not there. Even though the countries have been engaged in a dialogue in a different capacity in the past few decades and 20 plus years through the Nile Basin Initiative. So based on my observation, I'll give you a good metaphor to describe the current dynamic of Nile, the Nile River, and its countries. It's like how do you call it? A tug of war game in which the resource is being pulled from either ends, so to speak. On one hand, we have the downstream countries trying to maintain historical water use. On the other end, you have the upstream countries putting more claim on or asking for their share on the water. So as a result of this pulling from either end, we have tension building up on the resource, and if this continues, it's going to break. Obviously, it's a finite resource. It's a ticking bomb, for lack of a better word, and that would aggravate the situation even more if that happens. The result would be conflict, water shortage, infrastructures failing to provide their intended purpose. And what's even more alarming is that we cannot help not to put more pressure on the water. Everybody knows the population grows, increased demand for energy and water, and subsequently more stress on the river. That's even more complicated by these exogenous drivers such as climate change and environmental degradation. But the good news is that there is a technical solution to that. Most of these measures that need to be implemented as part of the solution, however, require a good level of cooperation among the countries, and we need to address that first. And I personally believe that the fundamental measure that needs to be taken is that the countries need to let go from both ends. They have to drop their these conservative views on the resource for the sake of their people. Obviously, you can't forever keep on saying, "Hey, I'm using the water over here. Don't touch the upstream." And on the other hand, the upstream countries should understand that millions of people depend on water downstream, so you can't really claim it all. They have to be ready to compromise, really, and not just in words, because this has been said several times, but really internalize the very fact that the water does belong to all, and be willing to go to the table and work out a strategic solution and give more weight to confidence building and trust in good faith. Once you achieve that, the rest is really a piece of cake. There's a wide array of solutions in place to explore multiple alternatives of achieving the natural synergy of the system. And speaking as an Ethiopian, of course, Ethiopia is not trying to block the water. Ethiopia believes in cooperation and equitable utilization of water. But then again, there's that $1 million question: what is really equitable, and how do you define that? And that's a bit challenging. Of course, there is no explicit solution of what a win-win path is. It's sort of like solving a numerical problem iteratively, but provided that you're on the right trajectory, through time you can converge into the win-win solution, or the optimal configuration shall evolve naturally. And we know the right trajectory has one direction, and that direction is, of course, through cooperation. What has the Nile Basin Initiative been doing in the past, and what did it do to really promote this cooperation among the countries? Well, the mandate for the Nile Basin, as you know, is primarily to provide a platform for the basin states to discuss on how to jointly utilize the water in a sustainable manner. Not just water, but the other related resources as well. And accordingly, it has promoted and enabled the countries to engage in multiple dialogue throughout the course of history over the past 20 plus years, and has achieved really a lot. It's difficult to list them all, given the time that we have for this workshop. But there are some outstanding achievements. For example, the countries have built a common modeling tool together. They have assembled, put together a common data repository, and several studies has been conducted along the lines of this win-win technical solution that I talked about earlier. But I want to talk about this particular study, for example, of what the Nile Basin is doing currently. As I had the opportunity to directly take part in this project. It's called Strategic Water Resource Analysis. The objective was really to inform the countries and to create a dialogue on selected both existing as well as emerging challenges of these transboundary river, both at basin scale as well as at sub-basin level, through doing a different scenario analysis and trade-off analysis. Basically, it was attempting to address the key question on how do we meet this growing demand of water in the future, and what can NBI really facilitate for this inter-riparian dialogue for the countries to realize their objective. So this project has two phases, the phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 was more about establishing the current baseline water dynamic, water use, and water yield and water use, and it was based on the data shared by the countries, based on the common modeling tool that the countries built together. And through this analysis, as part of this phase, really, it has managed to quantify the basin water balance, and through that explored the water supply reliability, and managed to identify some of the anticipated gaps or shortage in the future. The numbers are really alarming. And then it went back to the countries through stakeholder consultation, and basically saying, look, if you guys are not cooperating, and if things continue through unilateral development the way it is now, there are going to be some issues in the future. So how do you want to approach this? And it put together a working group of experts from the countries in a brainstorming session to come up with a broad spectrum of solution space. And a lot of interesting solutions emerged out of that discussion, basically in terms of water supply enhancement, for example, how to improve the yield of the basin or bring more water into the system, or in terms of demand management, or how should we manage our systems so that our consumption can be reduced and our system can be more efficient. Also, generally, how to manage the basin in really optimized way, such as coordinated operation of our water infrastructures and etc. So in the second phase, Nile Basin took these ideas that emerged out of these experts from the countries, and expanded the study with further specific studies referred to as the building blocks, and brought together all these special studies and came up with a strategic option or recommendation on how to utilize the water resource in the future to minimize the gap. What was really interesting for me from this study was the benefit of the cooperation really highlighted itself out of this analysis, meaning more cooperative scenarios were by far more dominant solution in terms of both addressing the gap as well as giving rise to higher benefit. And the message was clear at the end of the day. We have impending issues. There are some uncertainties in the system, such as climate change, etc. And this can be a common opportunity or a common threat to all of us. And we have a fragile ecosystem, which means we have a lot to lose. But there are win-win solutions, but these win-win solutions either require cooperation or are by far they yield better results with cooperative arrangements. So let's cooperate. This was one of the ways in which the NBI was supporting the countries and guiding the discussion through different analytic works to promote cooperation. Thanks.
Thank you. We will come back, and one of the things you raised the issue of what's equitable, how fair things can be done. There are some studies, and I want you to think about that on how professionally and from your expertise how you see that people could do it in the future. But that will be later on in the question. In the meantime, you can think about that because it's a term that say what is equitable, how we can come back to that. Okay, please continue sending your question for the audience, and our third but not the last is Dr. Hisham. Dr. Hisham is a postdoctoral research associate at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. It is one of the US Department of Energy national laboratories. Primarily, his research is focused on towards the sustainability of interconnected energy and water. In his PhD, he has done some work related with the Nile Basin as well, including GERD. He has explored into the impacts of transboundary energy dam and energy and water security, and how potentially some of this could be used to adapt on going forward, whether that's through the stress of climate change or increase in population. So I'm really happy to have him as well, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me also as part of this webinar series. So I'm going to build upon just what the speaker just mentioned in terms of the challenges in the Nile River Basin, but maybe shifting it a bit to the engineering perspective. And the theme of my my talk here is actually shedding light on the dam operation from space. I mean, as the speaker just mentioned, different challenges, including the climate change, the increasing in the population that will also increase the demand for the water and energy in the basin. Also, the system, as you know, the system is very complex, especially that it's crossing 11 countries in Africa. So sharing this system with different countries, making it very complex in terms of the making it very complicated in terms of the water management. But one of the big challenges that inspired most of my research is the data availability. And I look at this challenge from two dimensions. One is the data availability, and the other is data accessibility. So most of the countries, as you know, in the Nile Basin, they are developing nations, and they do not have a good network of in situ data, and so the data in most of the time is not available for taking decisions in water management or dam operations. But also, if the data even is available, most of the agencies in these countries are not sharing it. So another dimension of the challenge is that the data accessibility is another challenge in the basin. And so this kind of challenge of the data inspired my research to harness the satellite observations or satellite missions, which are available at a high resolution. I'm talking here in terms of the temporal resolution or the spatial resolution. And so I integrated just some of the satellite observations which are available over the Nile Basin with a hydrologic model to develop a decision support system, which is called NEBRAS. And NEBRAS stands for Nile Basin Reservoir Advisory System. And so it's a kind of a system it's still under development, but it's currently available as a beta version, which is available online, and you can go there in the on the website, looking at or using different satellite missions to look at the operation of some of the dams. And the beta version is available actually currently for two main dams on the base in the basins, like the highest one dam in Egypt, which is currently the largest dam in the basin, and also the GERD, which is still under construction, or I mean, they are already started the filling, but it's still also under construction. So this tool is currently working for these two dams, providing monitoring of the reservoir operation. If you go there, you can see how much of the water is coming into the dam, and then using a water balance, you can also identify how much of the water is releasing or how much of the water is being stored. This is all based on the satellite missions, and also integrating the hydrologic model. This system provides an opportunities to probably in the future, when it becomes when it's in full operation, it will probably provide some opportunities to test different scenarios. And as you know, one of the big challenges for the basin is how the GERD will be filled or operate in the future. And so using this system, you can test different scenarios and see how this will impact the downstream countries. And I hope that the system in the future can also inform decisions for stakeholders in the basin, including water managers, dam operators, or even the farmers, so that they can decide how much water they can use, how much the dam is releasing, so that they can, based on that, they can make decisions that can improve the water management in the basin. Another opportunities that exist actually, and it will be probably integrated into the NEBRAS system, is also using the satellite observations to monitor the change in the temperature, which probably has an important impacts in from the environmental and the ecological perspective. And you can use a satellite thermal bands and see how much temperature, or how much of the temperature is being changed in the stream, maybe upstream of the dam or downstream of the dam, and this will have an important implication, especially after building the GERD. Another thing for people who are also interested in the sediment and how the sediment is going to change also after building the dam, like GERD, you can again use a satellite observations and see and look at the changes in the total suspended solids, and get an idea about how the sediment is being changed in the downstream and upstream of the dams. So the system is providing currently a promising opportunity to guide and advise the operation of the dams in the Nile Basin. But saying that, I mean, we have to keep in mind some of uncertainties that are associated with using the satellite missions. I think I'll stop here, but I'll be happy to talk more about some of the sources of uncertainties that I've noticed in the system, and probably answering your questions as well. Thank you again.
Thank you. As I said, we will go now directly to the question and answer session. How we are going to do is I will have one question for each of the panelists first, and then Magdalawit will follow up with another round. And then we will continue to our Q&A as we collect from the audience as well. I think first I will go in that order with to Dr. Assad. Thanks for joining us again. That's a different time where you are in New Zealand. I think you raised a few issues that regarding in terms of the GERD, the safety, and so on. So I think some audience are asking here as well. So big picture, I think couple of questions I want to raise. I believe the dam safety issue has been resolved some time ago. There are some references on that as well. But I would like to know if there is any journal article that actually vetted to say some of the issues on that. In fact, I remember as we talk, I remember there was an article in AGU. It said, will Ethiopian disputed dam collapse? And that article was actually retracted by American Geophysical Union. So I just want to make sure that if you have something that on that area that said, weighted on that, you can give us. My understanding is in terms of sharing, there are about 150 or so design documents that I think Ethiopia share for both countries, including bringing the experts to the GERD site. So some of the economic impact you raise as well, well taken. But I will ask this: is the soil, the highland of the highland soil in Ethiopia belongs to Sudan? There's a important question, because some of the implication for the soil not going there is as an impact. The soil belongs to some countries. So I want to do that. From the socio-economic aspect, I think you are very well aware of one of the excellent researchers, Dr. Khalid. He looked at many socioeconomic impact of GERD, and in fact, their reviewed article was published probably 6 or 7 months ago. And they look at irrigation expansion after GERD, and some of their studies actually shows, tremendous amount of benefit for Sudan, including, $1 to $2 billion GDP every year for the next 40 years. So I think, what are the other things that you think? You already mentioned this, but what are the things that it's not, Sudan's question is not answered? I agree with you in terms of sharing the flow information. I totally agree that, because even, typical flow in August is twice what rosaries can use. So definitely information sharing is critical, and I think they should do that. And I think the government, Ethiopian government was saying, and as far as I understand it, in their negotiation, they did say that they will reciprocate in terms of data sharing. So I guess I want you to elaborate some of the point you raised regarding, a vetted scientific study that still claim there is a possibility of the dam collapse, which is astonishing for me. And then also the other impacts. And then the question of, does the topsoil of Ethiopia belongs to Sudan?
Okay, yes, okay. Thank you very much for those challenging questions. And I think, yes, of course, after the international panel of report, of course, maybe there have been some work which has been done with regard to the dam safety. However, when you are talking about dam safety, I think we need to look at the dam as a system. So the whole work is focused on the dam structure in itself, but you have to look at the dam as a system. You have to look at the dam and also the areas which will be affected if the dam collapse. Of course, you could make the dam better and better, but however, there is nothing called 100% safe. So every dam has a probability it might collapse. So there is a probability there. So you have to look at the scenario. What will happen, if there is a dam failure? What should I do? So if you look at the practice in the United States, when they build a dam or they want to evaluate the safety of the dam, they have to do dam break analysis. They have to see what population will be affected if there is a failure of the dam. Are those risks posed by the dam failure, are they acceptable to the people or not? So that has not been conducted. That study has not been conducted in terms of evaluation of risk, whether they are acceptable or not acceptable. So you have to put that in scenario. You can't say, oh, well, it's never going to fail. Okay, then if it fails, what are you going to do? What are your emergency plan in place? Do you have emergency plan? Do you have evacuation plan? Do you have warning? So all of those things, they have to be actually integrated into the analysis. And also dam break analysis, is one of the studies which has been recommended by the international panel of experts. So it has not been conducted. So in terms of simulation, I think there is, I think here by Suleiman et al. 2017, which has put some scenarios for dam break, and shows, like, if you look at the area between the Blue Nile and the White Nile in the Jazeera Plain, most of that area actually will be inundated. So what was the other question? Is about
yeah, I think I want to follow up. I guess
yes.
I think in terms of the possibility, it's possible, but whether it's probable. I mean, could there be a nuclear war and tomorrow the world would finish? Possible, but when you look at is there a study actually not to study what would happen after something happened, but the question of what's the probability of this happening. I think that's
Okay.
my second question was that about
yeah.
the topsoil Ethiopian,
Yes.
because there was a few impact you mentioned regarding the brick industry, the sediment, and so on. But this is, that's the topsoil in the highlands of Ethiopia. And my question was that topsoil belongs to Sudan. And if it stays in Ethiopia, why should be an impact when it is here?
Okay. So again, like with the issue of the dam safety, even if the probability is very small, you have to look at the consequence. And when you multiply the probability and the consequence, if the consequence is very big, even if the probability is very low, then the risk is very high. Because at the end of the day, the risk is multiplication of two quantities. That's the probability of failure and consequence. Even if the probability of failure is very small, but the consequence is high, then the risk is high. So you have to
Okay.
balance those one here.
Okay.
In terms of in terms of the ownership of the soil, I think that is a very interesting legal question. I don't really have the answer for that one. And the same thing is you have rainfall falling on Ethiopia. Who owns that water?
So okay.
Yeah, so it is a legal question, but it's apart from the
soil. Maybe you think it may
it's part
belong
of
to other
how
countries.
the dynamics of the catchment and how it has been working over there. It has been working for millions of years. And in fact, the sediment transport, if you look at previous research, it has actually changed throughout the centuries, just depending on whether you have a wet period or a dry period.
Sure. Okay.
So, but who owns it? That's the legal question. I
will go to Dr. Johannes. It's a very good one because I think it's very interesting. To me, the soil Ethiopia belongs to Ethiopia. And then also, I think I want to say that the probability, low probability multiplied by high consequences still be low, because you have a very small, you are multiplying. If I multiply something by zero, it will be zero. But I want to go to Dr. Johannes, and I want you to address a little bit of this because you have the expertise as well from the Nile Basin. Maybe some of us are not, as well as your knowledge in terms of some of these studies and so on. I want you to add on that as well, clarification. And then together with that, I want you to come back to what I said regarding the issue of equitable. So how do, at the end of the day, it has to be equitable for all of us to be a sustainable use of a limited resource. So how do we get there? And what are the things NBI or others they are doing on that? And also I want you to come back as well with the issue of this drought and how you share. When we talk about equitable benefit sharing, then is implied we have to share the drought as well. So if you just generalized and answer those areas as well. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. That's really an important question. I mean, this concept of equitable share on the water. One thing I can say is that there is no one objective way of defining that. It could mean a lot on how you translate it. But then again, there is this concept of what are we really equating? I mean, when we say equitable, are we talking about equitable distribution of the water, or because there is also this concept of benefit sharing that evolved at some point along the course of this many of discussions. So the short answer is what is equitable? Really, that's not something that can be defined easily. But like I said earlier, this solution can only emerge naturally through cooperation. There is no explicit solution to this. That's why I was really highlighting the importance of cooperation. You have to sit together and different trade-off. Look at the different trade-offs and compromise from either side, and this will automatically like direct the dynamic into a certain way that will lead to an optimal utilization of the resource, such as in the way it is now in Europe. They did not have this kind of arrangement on their shared resource overnight. They really took time to build trust and confidence, and they had a whole bunch of other cooperation on the side going on besides the water. There's a trade going on among the countries, so that's how you do it. You try to promote and facilitate cooperation, and naturally, water as one of the resources that you're sharing will eventually find its way on how to distribute it among the country. But I think the fundamental issue is that the status quo is not really going to work. Because Dr. Hisham raised a very interesting question. Does the water that the rainfall that happened in Ethiopia belongs to Ethiopia? Well, I may not be able to answer that, but I can definitely say that it does not 100% belong to the downstream countries, right? And that's the dynamic that exists at this point, which the downstream countries have effectively 100% allocated among themselves. So at least I know for sure it's not that. So the status quo is not going to work out. So change is going to come. It's inevitable. And instead of a forced change, I think the countries have to yield to come up with the solution by their own initiative in order to converge to that equitable arrangement in the basin. I think that's as far as I can say on that regard. Regarding the dam break analysis, yes. Intro has carried out some. Intro is the Nile Technical Regional Office that's located in Addis Ababa. That's part of the Nile Basin Initiative. Has carried out some analysis on dam break. That one I'm aware of. Thank you. Back to you, Dr.
Okay, thank you. The next one is for Dr. Hisham. I think you mentioned it's about this decision support tool you develop, and I think I heard you one of your presentation, the one you call Nebras. I guess in Arabic you say light, which is a nice name. And I think you mentioned regarding the difficulty in terms of transboundary data issues. And even you mentioned after you build your model, you were having challenge to verify some of the data, including the data from Egypt. And in one of later your travel, I think you got some data to verify some of your work. It's very important, especially this is based on remote sensing approach. Good water qualities, flows, levels, and so on are very important. And I believe all three countries actually, they should share without any reservation. As they say, you don't manage what you don't measure, or at least you don't get the information of the measurement. It is completely difficult to do that. How do you suggest currently that, with all these issues, the countries don't seem to be that open, but it is through sharing of, in fact, if it was my wish, it will be that the SCADA, that three countries could see it. For example, I can go to the website and see what is the level in Lake Mead and Colorado, and then I can say, okay, this is based on this, there is a shortage coming in. So how do you see this playing out? And what's your opinion on that in terms of the three countries without any restriction sharing the data regarding the Nile, including water use and so on? How do you see that happening?
Yeah, I mean, from my experience with collecting the data to build the system, it was really very challenging to find the data in the Nile Basin, especially most of the hydrologic data like rainfall or stream flow or water levels. or even some of the information needed for most of the dam operations, like the rule curve or this kind of curves that we need to understand how the dam is being operated. I was just lucky that we have some of the data in Egypt that's available by the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation, but even this data was like up to 2002 or something. So after that, the data is not easy to get it, or it's not available for the public. And so this is actually, I'm talking even from the countries that I was from, that having the data from there, it's a challenge. But even, I mean, if you talk even for Sudan and Ethiopia, I've tried to reach out to some of the colleagues over there, but it seems like it's not that easy to share the data. So from the perspective of sharing the data, as I said, it's not that easy, and I relied most of the time of the data we have in Egypt to verify the outputs from my system. And that's why actually I see that using satellite observation is providing this opportunity to give like a first guess to, and advise also the decision making in the system. So you can use that and see, for example, how's the, I mean, if we're talking about the GERD and the highest one dam, we can see, for example, how the GERD is being filled and from the satellite observation. And based on that, Egypt can make a decision in how to adapt or change the operation of highest one dam. So still, as I said, there are some uncertainties in the satellite observations, but I mean, most of these uncertainties or challenges can be a little tackled by some techniques. I mean, if you talk in terms of the uncertainties in the sensors or the algorithm, then one thing I have in my system, for example, is providing the outputs from different satellite missions, which can give you a range of the uncertainties, and based on that, you can make a better decision for the operation of the dams. So there are different sensors, and they are flying at with a different resolutions, and I mean, in terms of the temporal or spatial resolutions, they have a different temporal and the spatial resolution, and so when you integrate that all together, you can make probably a better decision, a better decision in terms of dam operation. So that's what I see in terms of like sharing the in-situ data from the three countries, and also the opportunities in using satellite observation.
Still a challenge ahead, I guess that's what you are saying, because I think at some point, I hope that we get, and like Dr. Johannes mentioned, I think one of the efforts in Nile Basin was trying to get all this data and at least make it available for researchers. So it's really my sincere hope that the countries will start to sharing. And I'm going to pass now with Magdalena. She has the next round of questions to you, all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Rousseau, and thank you, participants, for your answers so far. I have one question for you that I would like all of you to chime in about, and it has to do with things that you've already raised, such as water balance, water sharing, equitable water use. So if you go to Google and do a simple search about studies done on the Nile, almost all, if not most, if not all of the studies, especially having to do with water balance, water allocation, water resource management, dam operation simulation, climate change, they all have a baseline of the 1959 allocation, the allocation based on the 1959 agreement as a baseline scenario for all simulations, for all analysis, for all kinds of calculations and developments. Now we know the 1959 agreement is a non-starter for Ethiopia and the upper parent countries, but there is this insistence on the end of the downstream countries to keep that status quo. Now, having seen that this legal arrangement is seeping into scientific research, so to say, and this is a concern that I raise and also many professionals across the board raise, knowing these and knowing that this agreement is a non-starter for some countries in the basin, how do you see we can go forward on having a reasonable baseline scenario which we can start from? Because right now it seems like all the research, all the simulations are sort of solving the wrong problem. How do you think we can move forward without being based on the skewed status quo? And I would like all of you to chime in on this. Dr. Yannis, can we start with you?
Yes, I mean, if I get your questions correctly, how do we go about having a similar or identical baseline to base our studies off of without having to use the 1959 agreement? I think I would ask, why do we need to have that baseline in the first place anyway? What's really the objective? What are we trying to achieve? Are we even there yet to try and do analysis together? I think there are a lot of follow-up questions to that, but I think I will touch upon the general concept of most of the studies that came out, especially from Egypt and Sudan side. Of course, they are going to use the 1959 agreement because that's what they would like to maintain. But I am optimistic as much as pro cooperation. So I'm inclined to believe that unless there is a better offer to hold on to, it would make sense for the countries to hang on to the 1959 agreement. But if there is another arrangement, for example, what I've talked earlier, if there is a cooperation, if the countries really start developing the trust, sort of that example that I gave with tug of war example. Now they're pulling from both ends. Now the question is like, all right, let's move this somewhere else. You were trying to move the demarcation line. Before we do that, I think we need to relieve the tension that there is within, and the countries have to let go this 1959 agreement, and then start from scratch and look at a different configuration, really, even without having to look at the baseline to compare it with, because I personally don't like this word called impact. It's when you try to measure impact that you need a baseline, you need a reference from where really the reference is not really acceptable by mostly the upstream countries, and the downstream countries understand this as well, even though they're not ready to let it go. So I think we should abandon that idea and try to approach the problem from another dimension. I don't know if I have addressed your question, but back to you.
Dr. Assad? You're muted, please.
You are muted.
Okay, sorry about that one. Okay, I think people talk all about the 1959 agreement. There is also previous agreement. There is the 1902 agreement. There is also agreement in 1870 and so on. And also 1902, that is agreement is very important because it's actually prevents Ethiopia from building anything within the Blue Nile, except with the agreement of government of Sudan. And on the basis of that one, Beni Shangol also was given, which was a Sudanese land, was given to Ethiopia. So there is a lot of complex things. So people should not hang only on the 1959 agreement. If they wanted to look, they need to look at all agreements. Likewise, the issue here of water sharing in the Nile Basin is very, very complex because due to the special variability of rainfall. So there are some countries which receive more rainfall. There are countries which receive less water. Of course, the countries which receive less water, and if you say, oh, well, okay, I'm going to reduce your water, the water coming to you, then the natural reaction will be no. So that's just apart from human nature. And again, here, when you are talking about impact and using 1959 agreement as the basis of impact, that is not the only measure for that one. You could also measure the impact with reference to the natural flow. So why people are citing 1959 agreement? Then also there is one point which is also related to 1959 agreement, which were raised by Dr. Asafa in terms of GERD will provide opportunity for Sudan to expand and to expand its agriculture and so on. I would say that is Sudan actually had to utilize its share from the 1959 agreement. And also there is a recent article in the Journal of Hydrology, in which it was estimated that Sudan uses like 19.5 billion cubic meter per annually, and that's more than its share from 1959 agreement. So even that one, even based on that agreement, even the water which allocated Sudan has already been used. Again, if you wanted to use a different baseline, that has to be the subject of negotiation between different countries. And then again, another thing that has to be also put into consideration, also future plans, water conservation, improving irrigation efficiency, and so on. So there is a whole raft of measurements that has to be put in place so that we could come up with a better solution. But if somebody does not have any source of water, and if you tell them that you are going to reduce their share, of course they are going to say no. That is, so we have to think innovatively by listening to all people, by taking concerns of both downstream countries and upstream countries, and we try to reach a solution which is acceptable for all countries and also within the Nile Basin, and will lead to a win-win situation.
I think a bit of clarification is necessary. There are other agreements in the Nile Basin, of course, like you mentioned, Dr. Assad. The reason we're focusing on the 1959 agreement is because it provides numerical allocations, so to say, which are being picked up by the international media and even scientific studies, which then lead to impact assessment, like Dr. Rehan said, and that sort of reinforces the entrenched inequitable water use in the Nile Basin, and that's why the question was raised. Moving on to Hisham, do you have any opinions on how we can move forward?
I mean, I cannot say that much. I mean, Dr. Asa and Dr. Yunus did most of what I want to say in terms of that, especially that it's not my area of expertise to talk in terms of politics and the agreements that have been done. But I just want to say that, I mean, as a researcher or scientist, we are kind of preparing the ingredients for the politicians, but by the end of the day, the decision is being made. The decision is being made by the politician, whether they want to use these ingredients or that we are preparing for them or not. And for example, in most of my studies, we didn't just say that the 1959 is a baseline scenarios. We can test different scenarios, and that's what I did, for example, for the operation of Haiswan Dam. I've tested different scenarios in terms of the water allocation and also in terms of the water being used in the downstream by Egypt. So I mean, I just want to say that as researchers, we are always testing different scenarios, and we are not like stick to one of the agreements or something. So we are open for providing the solution for different scenarios, but I mean, it's the politicians who are going to take the decision and make use of this research or not. Thank you. Okay.
I'll move on to some questions from the audience. There have been a couple of questions to Dr. Assad and also Dr. Hisham and Dr. Yohannes. So I have one question that says, are all the Nile Basin countries willing to consider best practice examples of water sharing agreements in Africa and also other countries? I might also add, what is holding the Nile Basin back? And I know Dr. Yohannes touched on this about the trust and the lack of trust in the basin, for instance, being one of the major issues here. But the Nile Basin, at least the way I see it, has that advantage, that what we call the latecomers advantage, right? We can learn from the experiences of the other basins. So what exactly is holding the Nile Basin back from contextualizing and applying these practices in our basin? And again, this is something all three of you can reflect upon. I will start again with Dr. Assad.
Yeah, I think what is holding the Nile Basin, I think is also there need to be a political will to reach an agreement. and without the political will, I think progress would not be made. Of course, that political will has to be informed by robust science. And again, how do we manage the water in the Nile Basin if there is no information sharing? So like Dr. Dr. Hisham has talked about the difficulties he is facing in trying to access real data. So first of all, there have to be some form of information sharing so that is people will understand what is available and what is possible and not what's not possible, and that will inform decision maker, to reach an agreement which will benefit all the countries. But without information sharing, without having reliable data, then how do you make a decision? It will be, well, it might be just like a lottery.
Dr. Isha?
I mean, I think I just definitely agree with this, what Dr. Assad said. It's just sharing data is the main key, or that we need to promote for making like the agreements or whatever in the future to work. We have to promote the need to have an agreement on the sharing of the data. And I think if we start from here, we can move forward for making decisions in the future, and that can actually help the entire basin.
Well, in my experience, it's like keyword being here, reciprocal sharing of data. But Dr. Johannes, go ahead.
Right, yeah, on the data sharing, definitely, yes, that's how you express transparency. But yeah, like you highlighted, reciprocity is key and important. Otherwise, if one side is only sharing the data, that is definitely going to fail. That's exactly what has been the experience at early stages of the Nile Basin Initiative. At one point, I remember there was there was a big project called One System Inventory, and all the countries were really excited and enthusiastic about it, and they started collecting data and putting it in one repository. At first, it really moved. It's printed really well, but then again, countries start holding back data, and it just took one country. I will not say it in particular to hold the data, and then things start to fall apart after that. The countries immediately started losing face on each other, and it didn't proceed very well. So really, that reciprocity is very key. You can't just have one side giving information to the other. So that's what I have to say on the idea of are all the Nile Basin countries willing to consider other best practice example of how water sharing arrangement in African countries? Well, I would say yes, definitely. Best practices are always welcome, but again, each basin has its own challenge and its own opportunities. So, I mean, the Nile Basin. I personally, this is my professional opinion, should not directly adopt other water sharing arrangement. Of course, it has to be tailored to the challenge and to the opportunities of the Nile Basin. But yes, it's always a good idea to start what other basins are doing, and then try to customize that into what works best for the riparian countries of the Nile. Thank you.
That's an important point, contextualization for the Nile Basin situation. That's important. And I have to agree with you on the reciprocal data sharing, because even though Dr. Hisham, for example, he bypassed the lack of data with remote sensing, all experts agree that remotely sensed data is not a substitute for in-situ data, and in-situ data is actually necessary to calibrate and validate remote sensing data, and they should be supplementary. So this topic of data sharing, reciprocal data sharing, and making information available, that's something we have to really consider on a basin scale. Another question for, I guess, Dr. Assad from the audience is, has Sudan developed dam break analysis for the dams in Sudan without GERD? Did they have emergency plans? how these plans, if developed, differ from the plans with GERD? And if there is no emergency plan, whose responsibility is it to develop the analysis and develop the emergency plan?
Okay, as far as I know, there is no dam break analysis has been conducted, and that is was one of the recommendations from the international panel of experts. Again, normally the dam break analysis is the responsibility of the dam owner. That is, but here this is a very unique situation because this is a transboundary river. Because if you are talking about like a dam within a country, it is the dam owner who is actually responsible for doing that analysis. Because again, here with dam break analysis, again, this is very important for downstream countries, especially Sudan, because of the proximity of the GERD dam to the border of Sudan. Again, if there is a failure in the dam, most of the impact will be on Sudan, not on Ethiopia, because the dam is built on the border. So there is only very little reach which will in Ethiopia which will be affected, but not most of the impact will be on Sudan. So again, without dam break analysis, you cannot actually evaluate the risk properly, and you cannot determine whether the risks are acceptable or not acceptable. Again, what is acceptable and not acceptable risk, that's different between different countries. But in Sudan, we did not have that conversation about whether or not GERD both acceptable or not acceptable or unacceptable risk to Sudan. But again, that is something that is the three countries has to work on, because if it's failed, the consequences are on another country, not the country which is actually owning the dam. Then the question is well, how do you determine the acceptable risk? For Ethiopia, maybe that is for us. We have done what we can. That is acceptable for us. But for the downstream countries, they have different views because they will be on the firing line.
I think the question was about dam break analysis for Sudanese dams, but your comment is well noted. Dr. Turuso, would you like to click on the, sure, Dr. Johannes, chime in.
There has been so many attention on this dam break issue that I want to say a little bit something about that. Was it in 2020 that the earlier Minister of Water, Dr. Yasser Abbas, has publicly announced that GERD is in fact the safest dam in Africa at this point, and if not, one of the safest globally. Sudan has been participating actually in earlier phase of the dam. Sudan was supporting Ethiopia up to the point of providing materialistic support. And as part of the IPO study, 160, more than that, documents have been handed over to the countries, to both Egypt and Sudan. So nothing is hidden. All the design elements are known. So I don't think it's a dam. I mean, it's a question of risk, but rather the way I see it could potentially be a diverting topic. But I mean, in terms of dam safety, I'm sure even the Sudanese higher officials have admitted that it's the safest dam in Africa. Thank you, Delay.
Yeah, just wanted to say, just to comment about, because you mentioned Dr. Yasser Abbas or Professor Yasser Abbas. Also, Professor Yasser Abbas has said also, Ethiopia did not submit all the documentation with regard to the dam safety. He also said last year that is GERD dam poses risk to 20 million Sudanese people. So he has said many things. Okay, right. So just to put it on the record.
You don't believe him. Okay, that's
well, he has said many things. So again, the issue here, I think the point that I'm trying to say, there is need for transparency, and there is need for transparency, and also there is a need for completing all the studies is related to the GERD dam, especially in terms of its transboundary effects.
Yeah.
That is, I think that I will put that point very clear.
Good. So I will come back to climate change, but one of the things, since we discussed a little bit of our data sharing, in fact, I did look at the last time the 3 countries, they were trying to come up with some reasonable solution for all the 3 countries. And from the GERD side, actually, that they said they would give some of those information as long as it is reciprocated by downstream countries. And as far as I understand, it's the downstream countries they did not want to do that, but I think they should. I think as a scientist we need to bring this up, that everybody need to share this data. I cannot say it enough. I think there are sometimes I saw that there is a requirement, not just only water level, the amount, the quality, great, but upstream countries also need to know, especially if we get at some point, and I argue that how much water end up at high soil dam, it's not defined. I mean, it's not 84. So people, they have to do inverse modeling to come up some of the numbers. So that number could be, you know, around 97 or something like that. I think some of the issue is, and not bringing trust, is because they don't want to share this data. Ultimately, that will be used by everyone. So that's my opinion, because you know, if you share the data, you need to share even including water use. You know, we know as a hydrologist, I can tell you that surface water groundwater interaction is huge. So if I put a few million gallon pump next 2 miles from the river, I can suck the water out of the Nile River. So when we think about the data, we need to share the use, we need to share everything with, if we really want to get into some, you know, sustainable, long-lasting solution. With that note, I want to, because some of you have worked quite a bit in terms of how climate change impacts the Nile Basin. I want us to see, and this is one of the contentious issue in terms of the 3 countries to agree in a way that, you know, who would be responsible for the future drought. I personally has done some work in terms of looking at climate projection. Luckily, we don't get too much of low rain, rather we get this variable rainfall and so on, which we need to have to build some storage as well. And the question came is that how do we account for future change, whatever we agree as well? I can say all of them, they say temperature will increase, then you would store it somewhere upstream, obviously if there is some trust. So thinking in terms of climate change impact in the Nile, Eastern Nile, as well as the entire Nile, how do you think that, you know, ultimately these countries are going to share, whether we like it or not? We are bounded by one river. We are the same people. We can't just move ourselves out of this. How do you see on this one? I think I will start with Dr. Ioannis first, since you have done some climate change projection as well as decision support tools looking ahead, and I'll come back, Hisham, and with Dr. Assad in terms of impact to climate change.
Thank you, Druso. I think one general thing about climate change, there is an enormous amount of uncertainty in the projections. That together with the structural uncertainties in your model, together with the additional uncertainties that you introduce in your boundary condition, in your data, how much can we really depend on the result is one of the big questions. But I mean, diving deep into the results, the Nile Basin Initiative has done some analysis, and really, I mean, looking at the, you know, not just one projection, but really the distribution. One thing clearly that's indicated in all analysis is that we have extended tails in the PDFs, indicating that extreme conditions are going to be even worse. So we might expect, you know, more variability in the system. We might expect, you know, more drought or more flood in the system in the future. But in terms of the volume, there is no really clear direction as to how it will go. Some studies are indicating, you know, plus 30% increase in the Blue Nile and Ethiopia's highlands, and some studies are indicating to minus 10. So there are a whole range of values, and we should take climate change studies with a grain of salt, as there is a really enormous amount of uncertainty in them. But I mean, based on, I mean, that does not mean that the results are not absolutely useless, but we can learn something from them. Like I have indicated earlier, we're definitely going to get more tails on the distributions, more extreme events. So we can prepare for that. To align it with what I said earlier, in fact, climate change can be an opportunity or a threat depending on how we handle it. Let's say if the studies that are indicating more flow comes to the system, so if we are prepared in advance in the approaches, say a flexibility design. Flexible design is to, for example, you over design your infrastructure anticipating more flow. And then when there is a higher flood coming, your infrastructure can easily handle it. So we can implement this kind of concepts. So it's really both a threat and opportunity, but it's up to us how we manage it or how we get prepared for it. But definitely we are going to we should anticipate some changes in the variability and maybe a little bit on the overall volume of water. Thank you.
Dr. Hisham, what do you think? Given those, and also given, I know you did some of your work in terms of adaptive management as well for HAD. And I agree with Dr. Johannes as well. We have some uncertainty in the future, but having uncertainty doesn't mean no decision. We have to make a decision under the uncertainty, and we have to have some flexible rules, whether it's even agreement, whether they're operations, that should be able to help us to accommodate future change. How do you see, and expand a little bit, not just for within the HAD, but if you expand a little bit for other water infrastructure in the Nile Basin as well. How do you see that we should tackle this?
Yeah, I think that's an important point to raise in terms of understanding the operation of the dams with the climate variability. And I think you mentioned actually while you're saying when you said about the highest one dam that I mean, we are almost talking about having 84 kilometer cube of water stored or reaching the highest one dam. Sometimes it's larger than that. You said that, right? Like it can be 96 or something, but it can be less as well. Some years we have less than 84. And the reason for that is the climate variability, and this actually impacts the stream flow that's reaching to the downstream. So it can be high or less than what we are always talking about, or we're saying that Egypt is receiving 84, and so this actually climate variability, when we talk about it, and we talk about also the climate change in the future, this will probably impact the operation of the dams, and how the dams which are existing, they will adapt their operation to these changes. My research, if I talk about my research, at least when we looked only about into the climate variability, not testing different climate change or using climate change models or something, but we just look at the climate variability, and this is actually will impact the adaptive strategy of the highest one dam, especially if the coming year is a dry year or wet year. Then it becomes very important to how to operate the dam. And this will, I mean, the system is interconnected between different countries, then something like that, they will need more cooperation, because a country like Egypt, which is the most downstream country, then they will rely on the information that's coming from the upstream. And so again, sharing that is important, but some of the other alternatives is using forecasting models, or the existing models that can forecast or predict the weather in the future. Some of these models, they have a high accuracy, especially for a short time scale, like maybe 1 month or so. They call it sub-seasonal forecasting. So we can use also these tools to help in predicting the water that's coming from upstream. I believe, I think Magdowitz, she said something about the remote sensing, that we cannot rely on the remote sensing at all, and we have to keep thinking of the in situ data. I mean, I don't agree with this statement, because I mean, we still can use the remote sensing for making decisions, and this is if you think about most of the agencies in the water basin, they are using some of the forecasting model to predict the water or the flow in the river, and then making decision based on that to operate the dams. So we can think about the remote sensing something very similar to these forecasting models, because if the remote sensing is able to see something in the upstream, and there is a travel time, or it's taking time for the water to reach from the upstream, like Ethiopia to Egypt, can take like 2 to 3 weeks. So if we understand something from the remote sensing in the upstream, it's exactly like using the forecasting model, and then we can adapt the operation in the downstream countries, like adapting the operation of the highest one dam. So I just want to highlight this, that remote sensing is still beneficial, and we can think about it exactly like the forecasting models that are being used in most of the water agencies in the Nile Basin, or in general. So thanks again.
Yeah, so I'm going to pass the same question to Professor Assad in terms of climate change, but I want to add also from Sudan's perspective, at least some of the models I have seen in terms of climate change, that the variability in the upper Blue Nile would increase. In fact, you would think that GERD help on that to mitigate some of them. You know very well the 2020 flood, which we looked at it, that flood was actually once in 100-year event. It's more than 11 or so cubic meter per second at its highest, and we know what kind of devastation it did to Sudan. But with GERD, at least one of that's, and earlier study that I mentioned with Dr. Khalid, he did not look actually in terms of the avoided cost of damage to people and to properties. He just looked some of the, the benefit from other aspects. So given that, how do you see going in? For sure, I agree with you that they need data communication, that's for sure, because it's not a lot of space, but even more, then that's where the value of GERD, in fact, plays much more to Sudan than anyone else from this perspective. So what do you see?
Okay, yes, I will. Okay, thank you very much for bringing the 2020 flood events. And I think some of the recent research that is I have been doing shows that is the droughts and the floods in the upper upper Blue Nile are actually related to a phenomenon called atmospheric rivers. So when those atmospheric rivers are present for a long period of time, for a particular number of days, you will have floods, and when they are absent, also you will have droughts. So in terms of climate change, if you look at the whole Nile Basin, the recent international IPCC report, International Panel of Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has painted a very complex picture for rainfall in terms of spatial and temporal variability of the Nile Basin. They have said that in terms of East Africa, there will be increase in the mean annual rainfall, there will be increase in the temperature, but on the other hand, you have increase in the intensity of extreme flood, that is floods and droughts. So that is, again, will make things a little bit complex in terms of trying to manage water resources, and also it will make it also more challenging, for agriculture, because if you have higher temperature, also you have higher evaporation losses, and also it will be an issue for food security, because there is a lot of agriculture within the basin which are actually dependent on rain-fed agriculture. So it's not just the issue of dams. So it's much actually wider issues. Of course, we have to be adaptive. We have also in terms of operating our water resources. We have to look very closely at how we operate the dams, right? And also we need to look at different ways of maybe improving maybe irrigation efficiency, for example. We need also to improve community resilience. And this is an area where all the countries actually will collaborate. But however, I said that is in terms of before implementing these changes, there is a need for more localized studies. And that is where the countries would collectively benefit from that one. If all the experts from these countries, they have come and agreed maybe on a framework, they make the data available, then I think that will make huge difference, to the decision making with regard to water, agriculture, and other aspects within the basin. But that's of course, require trust and requires also scientists to come together. Of course, people will have their different views and different opinion, but however, difference is also good because it will enable you to look at the problem from different perspectives. We don't have to agree on everything, but we need to listen and see what the other people are saying. I think that is actually very, very important. In terms of GERD dam, what do you call it? Having extreme events, that could also be good or bad, depending on how the frequency of the droughts will occur. For example, if you have extended period of droughts, that will be a big challenge, especially that is for maybe for the filling of the GERD dam, and also for how do we operate the high dam of Aswan. Also, it will be a very challenge also to the Sudanese, because they need also information about how much water will be released and how much water will be coming, so that is they will be able to operate their dams. Again, the dams in Sudan, if you compare their sizes with the high dam of Aswan or maybe Exeger, they're just like babies. They are very, very, very tiny, and they depend on the water which is stored within the flood season. So they have to be very, very careful about how they actually operate their dam. And again, there have to be a cooperation, for those dams, with the existence of big dams also in Ethiopia, and there have to be a greater cooperation, in terms of information sharing, because the last time, I think 2020 or something like that one, the first filling of the GERD dam has caused some problems for water supply station, taking water from the Nile, because there have been sudden withdrawal of the water, and then most of the water supply station within the Nile basin also they have gone out of operation. That should not have happened, because if there is a coordination, then of course they could have released more water earlier to avoid that situation. This is why in Sudan we are very, very concerned about the impacts of GERDs on Sudan, because our dams are very small. We don't have a buffer. So basically, it's like you could compare it to something like pay as you go. So whatever water you get, you store it for a short time and then you release it. So we don't have that big buffer, which will enable you to to mitigate the effects, say for prolonged droughts. We don't have that capacity. So we have to rely on the water which comes each year.
Yeah, I certainly agree that they need to cooperate, but the 2020, I was watching closely. In fact, the Sudanese person sent me the flow at El Daim, and it's not true. They had a minimum of, I remember, like 100 millimeter cube per day, and he sent me the flow, and they sent this information to me where he was saying, hey, GERD exasperates the flooding. So there was not drought there. So, but anyway, it's a measurement.
Yeah,
I do have the data. I do have the data, and there was enough water going at that time. But you raise a very important point regarding conservation. And before I pass to Magdalena, and comes back a whole lot to Egypt as well. Most of the time we tend to look only supply side, but we need to see at the demand side. Demand side, whether it is irrigation, whether it is urban water supply, which is my area, for example, we need to figure out how best to use our demand. It's not like, okay, this is my need. I want to keep that need, regardless of where the flow is. At some point, it's not going to be enough, the whole Nile for all of them. So I think I want Dr. Hisham, you to start. And there has been some studies in terms of where some of these efficiency issues are with Egypt in terms of, loss in irrigation, other supplies. So that improvement alone, and this was some of your studies, some of them other people are arguing about the numbers. I wouldn't quote them, but I think they are significant number actually. So what else can we do from the demand side? We shouldn't be only looking at the supply side. It's just because we want, we cannot make up the flow. The same thing with Sudan as well. It's not, this is my wish, but our wish may not be possible because we have to share what we have. So how do you see the demand side? What else can we do on the demand side to have, efficient use of our resources? And I will start with you, Dr. Hashim.
Yeah, I think, I agree with you. When we are looking at this issue, we have to look at both sides, the demand and supply as well. Yeah, just before saying my my take here, I'm not representing Egypt, by the way. I'm just
we understand. Okay. None of us.
Okay.
yes.
Because I see. Anyway, so I agree. As I said, we have to look at the supply and the demand side, and from the supply, we say we have to share the data. We have to take into considerations the climate change, the climate variability, and the dam operation. All of this is very important for the supply side. But when you talk about the demand side, we have to see how much water is needed for the irrigation. And I think there is two things we have to think about it. One, when we are talking about the water we need for the demand, sometimes we cannot control that much because we have the population, we need we have the farmers, and we need to irrigate the land. So this amount of water we needed anyway for the irrigation. But the other thing we have to think about it as well, that how can we efficiently use this water? So using the water more efficiently in irrigation, I think this is what is very important to consider. Also, the other way to consider, if we are relying more on the surface water, which is we are talking more about the surface water that's coming from the Nile River, we can think also about other alternatives like the groundwater if it's available. In Egypt we don't have that much groundwater resources. Unless you consider the Nubian aquifer or something. We can also think about some of the treatment for the wastewater, and here actually, that's what Egypt has. Some of the actions Egypt already has taken for the last couple of years of building some of the wastewater treatment plants and relying on that partially on the water use in Egypt. Plus, also Egypt has putting some restrictions on the irrigation of some of the crops which are water intensive, especially like rice or wheat or something. So in terms of taking decisions Egypt are taking, that as far as I know from my readings, that Egypt has taken some actions in terms of the demand side. The other thing also that I'd like to mention is the term that's called the virtual water, which is basically in terms of using the water resources you have, you're importing some of the crops that you need from other countries, and this is what we call the virtual water. This point is sometimes raised that downstream countries can rely on importing some of the crops so that they can probably reduce the irrigation water used. I think that's one thing we can consider, but we have to keep in mind that it's not just thinking about it in terms of like water or irrigation, but here the economy the economic perspective or the economic point of view here is very important, because it's not just importing the crops without considering the economy of the country and what they can import and what they are exporting. So yeah, I think that's my take in these points. I agree we have to consider the demand. Egypt is taking some action from the demand side, and there are different options to reduce the demand or improving the water use in the downstream countries.
Dr. Assad, on that one, on terms of demand side management, and
I think that is a very important. Of course, we have to look at maybe. So we have to look at the problem holistically, just not a water resource problem. We have to talk to other experts from the agricultural field. Maybe we need to use crops which are most water efficient. And that's where maybe the people from the agricultural sites, there might be some variants of crops which are actually most drought resistant. And also in terms of, what do you call it? In terms of like increasing the water supply, also we need to think about something like maybe artificial rainfall, yeah, which is practiced in many countries where there is a shortage of water. And that is an area actually where the countries could collaborate and share experience. Because imagine that is if you manage to increase maybe in arid and semi-arid area, if you manage to increase even by maybe 50 to maybe 60 millimeter, if you increase, over an area by 60 or 70 millimeter per year, that might mean huge difference to groundwater. So we have to think innovatively and about what we can do collectively. And again, that's an opportunity. It's a challenge, but it's at the end of the day, and at the same time, it's an opportunity where the countries could collaborate, share experience, and maybe do some experiment and see what will happen.
Yeah, before I pass it to I think Hisham also raised the point of the groundwater. I actually argue that we should use, I think this is the word you were looking, Professor Assad, as well. It's a conjunctive water use. So typically we should use both groundwater and surface resources. We do this in Florida, the same thing, and especially in a place like Sudan, which the groundwater and the surface water interaction is dynamic. So in a year when we have a lot of flows, you can use from the Nile, the river flows. And then in a year when you have drought, then you can go to the groundwater to meet some of the water. I know that in some of those areas, they have significant amount of groundwater and the recharge takes some time, maybe within 2 years, at least in similar areas, what you have in Sudan, we have studied many places, the reaction time is about 18 months to 2 years. So that means you can at least weather a drought time for a year or so, getting a little bit more into the ground. And then when you get surface water, I think they should do that. Again, we go back to the issue of data sharing. Nobody wants you to know how much they are pumping today or even to think on this way. I think at some point they would need to do a conjunctive water use, in a sense, using both groundwater and surface water. I know quite a bit of countries, they have a groundwater as well. So with that note, I'm going to pass to Magdalena as well.
Thank you, Dr. Taruso. We have 13 more minutes, so I'll try and get 1 or 2 rounds of questions. There is a bit of interest in the chat regarding a statement Dr. Assad made regarding the water use in Sudan. People are asking if you can confirm or if it's verified data that Sudan is using 19 billion cubic meters, because the narrative so far has been Sudan is actually using less than its supposed share, according to the United
Actually,
that information.
Well, I'm actually ready for that one, because I think I have a presentation which I did in Florida, in Florida University, and there is actually more references over there. So I think I would refer first of all to the paper which is published in 2017 in the Journal of Hydrology by a couple of authors, That's a very good journal, Journal of Hydrology.
If you could share the link in the chat, I think that would be of interest to the participants. And then I will move on to the next questions.
Okay, but, okay. I was trying to email some of the presentation, but I couldn't do it from here. But I think there was I think from Kerry, but I was trying to email the presentation for him, but I didn't know how to do it. But
take your time.
Yeah, I didn't know how to do it, but it's Journal of Hydrology, and it's estimated as 19 billion cubic meter per day. Again, there was a book on hydropolitics of the Nile Basin by John Waterbury, and in page 236 in 1975, 1976, he estimated the amount of water used by Sudan as 17.2226 billion cubic meter. Again, there was what we call it. There was here a report from the Ministry about the water resources of Sudan. That is a report from the government of Sudan, and the estimate that is, I think, in 1977, it's around 18.25 billion cubic meter.
It's interesting because it changed.
And also, if they go and look at the PhD of the late Dr. John Garand Dimedior, which was what do you call it? Which was the head of the political movement and the military movement in Sudan. He did his work on Jungale Galan. You will find that if you look at his PhD, you will find also similar numbers, and there is numerous. And also, I have talked to former engineers with the ministry. They confirm these numbers. So there is something that we obtain from the ground. There is something already published, which is available in the public domain. So it's not something that I have invented. So it is information which is available in the public domain.
Well, these numbers certainly put a different narrative and a different perspective in the whole water balance and sharing in the Nile. And I think that could be an interesting thing to pursue, hopefully in a separate setting. Yeah. But there is another question I think that Dr. Hisham and both of you can reflect upon. It says, what do you think about, how do you see foreclosure cases? And I assume they mean foreclosure of future developments in relation to dialogues, negotiations, and transboundary agreements. And I might add to this, like especially regarding the GERD. The GERD is not going to be the last infrastructure that's going to be built in the Nile Basin. There are going to be numerous other infrastructures in the Nile Basin, both consumptive and non-consumptive. So in relation to foreclosure of future projects, what do you think should be the relationship between existing infrastructures and new developments? We can't expect new infrastructures to bend backwards and cater for existing infrastructures. It also doesn't make sense to completely ignore what is there on the ground and then just move on with new infrastructures. But there does seem to be, and with the exception of a few studies, most notably Dr. Hisham's, we don't see this idea of adapting to changing circumstances in the Nile Basin. So I'm curious to see what both of you think should be the way forward regarding on how to synchronize existing and future infrastructures and the case of foreclosure of future developments as well. And I think this also touches upon the idea of cooperation and trust that all of you have rightly raised so far in the discussion so far. So I can start with you, Dr. Hisham, or Dr. Assad, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point, because we always talk about the GERD, but the GERD maybe is a good example of what we are going to do in the future with other infrastructure and other dams, because some of the data sets which are published already, it's showing how many dams, or especially the hydropower dams, which are planned in the basin for the future. And there are about 35 dams that can come on in the future in the Nile Basin, mostly in the White Nile and Lake Victoria area, but and also some of them are in Ethiopia and Sudan. So these dams, which are, if they are coming in the future and they are being in the system, then it would become more complex in how to operate the existing dams or the existing infrastructure. And so it's important for now to see how we are gonna deal with the GERD and the challenges. And I believe still that the cooperation is very important. This what will help in when we have the other future structures. So I think as we talk today in this webinar about different solutions, especially with having an agreement with data sharing, considering climate change or climate variability, and all of these aspects that we mentioned in the talk today, I think they have to come together under the umbrella of cooperation between all the countries of the basin, so that they can reach a win-win solution. The other word, I mean, I'm talking about the cooperation, but also I want to talk about the adaptive operation of the existing dams. So the existing dams, probably they will not or they cannot be operated in the status quo. They have to adapt their operation based on what this future system looks like. What are the climate change is going to impose on the system? What are the new structures that are being added to the system? So I think my point here is that we have to highlight two terms. One is the cooperation between the countries, but also the adaptive operation of the existing dams, so that they can operate better in the future with the challenges that are coming in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the climate.
Very well said. I couldn't have put it better. And this is something I really genuinely appreciate about Dr. Hisham's research. It's very forward-looking and very realistic in the sense that it does consider existing infrastructures, but also future developments and current developments in the basin. And this idea of adaptive management, I think, needs to be adopted by more scientists, more researchers. Dr. Assad?
I think, the future will be much more complex because, population will grow within the Nile Basin. Again, all the Nile Basin countries has also aspiration for economic development. Issue of food security will be a key issue, and this is being highlighted by the current war in Russia. That is like food security is a big issue. So again, we need to think about the bigger picture, not just to think about water resources in isolation. We need to think about in interdisciplinary fashion, and that is with the whole purpose, of improving, to community resilience. How do they respond to extreme events, whether it's floods or droughts and so on? But that would require cooperation, from people from different fields within the Nile Basin. I think it is very, very clear that is there a need for cooperation, for sharing experience, and also for sharing scientific knowledge to come with a solution which will benefit all the people living within the Nile Basin. Say, for example, here, sometimes I try to do research on the Nile. Sometimes I will be very reluctant to put any PhD students or any postgraduate student to work on it because of data unavailability. Because that is, that's too much risk. We do have a lot of experience in other regions of the world, but we would love to apply them to the Nile. But sometimes it's just the risk of obtaining the data is huge, and you cannot actually, it will be unethical for me, to put somebody on a project where I have considerable doubts whether I will get the data or not. But again, when we make the data transferable, then we could test different scientific hypotheses or different engineering solution which will benefit all the people. Again, people also, now we're talking about data sharing, but we need to also to look forward about trying to evaluate what we collect now. Then we have to ask ourselves the question, are we collecting the right kind of information? Do we need to augment it? Say, for example, do we have adequate rainfall station, for example, within the basin? Are we monitoring water quality? Are we monitoring water use? Right? So these are all questions. So we have to do very comprehensive evaluation of the data needs to support to support decision making now and also in the future. Just not people talk about information sharing, because, well, if I don't have information, then I can't share it with you. so we have to think about what do we need, to manage the situation better.
Yeah, I think we are almost finishing. So before I pass to Samson to close us out, I just want to bring one final opportunity for both of you to give you, and unfortunately, Johannes has to drop off, I think. So last time we held a town hall, and Dr. Abdul Karim, who was the executive director with the Nile Basin, worked for a long time. One thing it's stuck in my head. In terms of what's going in the short term and long term, he said that he doesn't see that people actually open up in a short term. He is going to see that individual countries going to their unilateral way for at least some time before they realize they have to come back. I mean, I wanted to hear more optimistic from somebody who partly researcher and so on, but he is speaking from the ground and what you see because of all the issue they have, distress and so on. He see this individual's unilateral action is going to continue for some time. And then what do you think in the future? Are you optimistic that we get to a place where we will be able to try to come up with some solution that help everyone? Or do you think you agree in some sense with him that for some years probably this unilateral individual work will continue because it's just there is no space for cooperation right now? It's a little bit pessimistic for him, but I just want to hear your final thought on that, and then I will pass it to Samson to close that out. Thank you all.
Okay, I think for me, I will be very optimistic. I think we have reached. I think the countries have reached critical junctures in terms of individualistic action, and again, for them, to get greater benefits, they have to cooperate. And then I think that is the way that that's a better way for going into the future.
Hisham, any thoughts to thinking?
No.
I mean, we know what's better, but we're trying to be realistic given where the countries are, their postures and so on. I mean, we're trying to be realistic. Are they showing, a way to open up and see, or rather than trying to just, looking at their own benefit, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think same here. I'm optimistic as long as we all have good intentions to develop our region and our basin. So I'm optimistic that the three countries or the entire basin will move forward to think together that we have to share this. We are sharing the basin, so we have to cooperate together, and so that we can all develop. So I'm optimistic for the future.
Back to you, Samson.
Okay, it's been very educational, and I think it's a first Egyptian guest we have on the panel. I'm very happy. I'm very optimistic that the experts, the scientists, stay on the science and provide information so that politicians and leaders can make an informed decision that benefits everyone. So we'll have more of these. Thank you for coming. And I was also reading the chat, questions, and some of it we'll provide it to you by email. And this is our first, but we're going to have more of these discussions. And I want to thank you on behalf of We Aspire. We're always optimists to invite guests like yourself and have a civil discussion like the one we have today. And I want to thank you for spending time away from your Saturday, from your family, to be with us. And everyone that attended this session, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Taruso and Magdalawit, for moderating the discussion. Dr. Assad, Dr. Hisham, we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.